So we're going to talk a little bit about using technology in your business development efforts. Okay, what I should mention is we're rather familiar with firms which include professionals. Think of engineers, CPAs, and law firms. Many organizations would come to us where they're feeling some pressures around their business development or growth patterns. Bluntly, we've seen several of those organizations come to us over the past few months, perhaps as a result of COVID. But the reality is I think COVID maybe just highlighted some of the biz dev issues that they were having since there was just more at play, if you would. Okay, so we've worked with several organizations of professionals. If you look into Sandler, here's all you're really going to find. You're going to be able to find that we're international, okay? And we've dealt with tons of organizations, many of which are raving fans. That being said, reality is we're not for everyone, okay? So when you think of just, the adult learning process, which we're going to go through a mini version of right now, pretty simple, right? You got to be aware of an issue or a situation that you can improve on. You got to receive some knowledge, try some skill, and then be masterful. By the way, one Sandler rule I should mention to you: you can't get good at trying something once. I know that sounds pretty simple, but the first thing you need to do today to try something once is to actually decide to try it, okay? And if you try it multiple times, what I might suspect is over time, much like going to a gym, if you would, you can see some muscular change. In fact, there's a few of you on this call who have probably gone through some transitions over the past few months that you were kind of launched into, not by design, but more by default. And what you realize as a human is you can change. You can change. Think of even like the kids going back to school this week. They're going to go through some change. There's a lot of nervous parents out there. I am one myself. But the reality is they'll all adjust and succeed, just like we will in business. Okay. Now, that being said, we've been polling our clients, which includes organizations and professionals like yourselves, on three main questions over the past few months. So over the past few months, now that you're selling remotely, maybe you can't be face to face or like physically in the same room as people, maybe as you used to, how is it impacting you? And when we think about what the impacts we're seeing, some are telling us that we just have way fewer appointments in our calendar, okay, for where there's net new business opportunities, maybe referral networks or just other forms of biz dev that maybe we were involved in before. They're not filling our pipeline of opportunities so that we can at least stay flat, okay? Certainly not go down in terms of revenues and profits and fees, but stay flat at least, or for that matter, grow if those were the kinds of goals that you had, okay? Now, when you don't have enough appointments in your calendar with net new opportunities, obviously that future financial growth is at risk. So others are telling us things like there is actually a lot of opportunity coming their way. Problem is they're not converting often enough. There seems to be a commitment problem out there. Buyers are not hitting the green button and making change because of the uncertain environment. The last thing we're hearing is some organizations are telling us that they're losing touch with their existing clients. Many of you, of course, back at the start of all of this, you probably doubled down on your client relationships. What I mean is you over-serviced, okay? Now, hopefully you didn't do a whole bunch of free consulting, but you over-serviced and you made absolutely sure that you retained them through this difficult environment. Because of course, as advisors to your clients, you were presented with a moment to provide great advice and I guess generate value, if you would, which is, by the way, an overused term, pardon me, in I think business development and dare I say sales. The other thing I should mention is sometimes we do deal with organizations in the professional space that don't actually like the word sales. We'll talk more about that in a moment, okay? So, I think one of the struggles that we've been seeing with good organizations is that transition over to technology, right? And just the notion that there's all this technology out there, but sometimes it doesn't work together. Other times it's hard to make a choice around, what we need to become proficient at, so that we can still do things like, build rapport, get commitments, find out about people's problems, even through a screen. Okay, so when we think about the transition to technology, I think there's three things at stake. There's how you feel about transitioning into a more technical version of biz dev. There's the activities, call that behavior, and then there's how fluid you are with the technology. By the way, one of the things that you're seeing today is a use of technology. So, my hope, because we've been practicing this, is it seems smooth to you. By the way, 5 months ago, it wasn't very smooth at all. Now, things like Hopin, which is what we're in today, is a technology I've used. Things like Zoom, Teams, you maybe use them all, right? And I think that we have a responsibility now to become very good at it, so that we don't create some sort of awkwardness or weirdness just because there's this screen between us. Okay, so that would be technical. Think of technique, and I think where technology suddenly has entered our sphere of things as business owners, which, by the way, I am one, is in the realm of prospecting, how we sell, and then how we manage accounts. So we're going to talk a little bit about the prospecting and selling aspects of things. Now, before I go to prospecting, though, which we're going to talk about first, I think the biggest issue in any prospecting is what goes on between our ears. Okay, maybe you out there on the webinar here, you've attempted to prospect new clients over the past several months, and maybe you even heard things from the other end like, how dare you prospect me during this difficult time. My hope for you is that wasn't the last time you actually attempted to link in with someone, or attempted to call someone and get an important business decision maker on the phone, because the reality is there's many over the past several months who have kind of like gone into a shell and aren't making any decisions. Those are probably the ones that were upset that you called them unannounced. But I bet you that even in a non-COVID environment, those same people would have reacted the same way. So I think attitudinally, we still need to have conversations with other adult human beings who can make decisions about making a change and perhaps working with us. It's our responsibility to do that as business developers, right? And it is that simple. Let's lower the pressure on prospecting attitudinally right off the top here. It's all about two adults, which we are one. You're one, I'm one, they're one, having a conversation. That's really all prospecting is. It's really all prospecting is, and I think that should be our attitudinal mindset. And by the way, we're not 10 anymore. You're allowed to interrupt someone's day. You're allowed. When we were children, we were told it was impolite, right, to interrupt, but not so much anymore, especially in the business development game. The other thing we were told is don't talk to strangers. Believe it or not, those kinds of messages are part of our DNA almost, and they can impact our ability to go out and grow our business at the rate that we want to grow it at. Okay, so that's attitude. So, by the way, if you have limiting beliefs right now, or negative thoughts about prospecting, technology or not involved, you won't perform at the level you should at when you actually get involved in the behavior of prospecting, virtually through things like LinkedIn, or for that matter, voice to voice, which is of course always the better way to go, because you get your tone heard. They hear your words. These days, they even see your body language, right? Cool. So let's move on. So let's talk a bit about the behavior triangle, and let's stick to prospecting and selling. I think one thing I've noticed from our client set over the past few months is the ones who came in with a very strong behavioral plan around how they're going to prospect and sell, what they needed this fiscal year, if you would. they were able to transition pretty easily. Okay. There were two versions of people who didn't have a solid behavioral plan. Some just threw up their hands and began externalizing about how difficult it was to, produce business, right? And I would gather some people on the call here today, some of you are partners, and although you're partners, you're not just in the practice of accounting. You actually have to develop business, and there may be more pressure on you, right? Others, maybe you're associates in your organization, and to become partner, you have to be good not just at accounting, right, and servicing your clients, but also at bringing in new files, right? Okay. So if you didn't have a behavioral plan going into this, it's possible that you just stopped, you just threw your hands up, or in other cases, what we saw is just professionals working way too hard to still achieve what they were looking to achieve, but like they were hitting like a brick wall, okay, because they were trying to do things the same way. Okay, so my view is we've got to be mathematical. We've got to be a bit mathematical. So, something, and maybe this is your moment today. What is your number? So specifically, like, how many net new opportunity decision maker conversations do you need to have your best year, to have the year you wanted to have the year perhaps between now and the end of the year that you've replanned for? Maybe you went back to your plan and you adjusted a touch based on the environment and the changes. A smart thing to do, but nonetheless, do you know your number? So, there's a lot talked about in regards to like KPIs. Have you heard of KPIs, right? Key performance indicators. Sure, you've all heard of that. Well, here's my key performance indicator, the one I would advise all of the businesses that I deal with who are extremely serious about growth. Net new decision maker opportunity conversations. That is your key performance indicator. Once you do that, well, once you get that moment, really it comes down to how good are you at biz dev or sales. It has nothing to do with your product or service, because remember, they've bought nothing from you yet. So all they can rely on is how well you sell, or don't. Okay. So do you know your number? And if you don't, what I might suggest is you should. Okay. And once you know your number, you can make simple transitions in your biz dev plan to get those number of appointments that you need to create, that waterfall effect that eventually leads to sales and fees and business and clients that will stay with you for years, right? And what we're seeing some clients pause on are things, of course, like, actual face-to-face networking events, in-person meetings, right? Trade shows or travel, or even like, association memberships where you're doing networking, or, walking into someone else's office and doing like a, quote unquote, learning over lunch, right? Maybe you've done that before. Okay, and the new behaviors we're seeing that are helping people catapult themselves towards those net new decision maker conversations are things like video conferences, social selling. Maybe some of you have gotten involved in that, right? Cold calling, man, what's old is new suddenly. Cold emailing. Let me give you something here. Write this down if you have a pen handy. Here's what I'd like you to do if you like cold emailing. Maybe you're a little skittish about picking up the phone, or the phone weighs a little more than it actually does. Remember, that's attitude, right? So you'd rather cold email. Go check this out. Just go to Google. Here's what you're going to type in. You're going to type in breakthrough email space Sandler. Okay, yes, Sandler, that is us. So what you'll find there is you're going to find a webinar, about 60 minutes. It's a bit tech hacky, if you would, at the start. It's not very good, but if you can get through the first 5 minutes of the tech issues, the content is fabulous and it works. Okay, now the problem with cold emailing strategies is when you send stuff out to brand new people and then they don't get back to you, right? And of course, there's some laws around it and that sort of thing. Some of you just need to build your lists, right? And get people open to receiving information from you. But in terms of cold emailing strategies, really what it comes down to is getting a response. That's the problem with cold emailing strategies. We send this these great emails out, we take time on them sometimes, and then we don't get any feedback. Okay, so what this strategy, breakthrough email strategy, will do, combined with some Sandler stuff, is get you more feedback. I'm not saying that it's going to close you deals every time, but what it will do is increase the level of feedback you get from those you're emailing. So you know what to do next, if anything, okay, versus kind of chase them down a little bit. And that's a big problem with prospecting, right? Is just, we're thinking more about the prospects than they're thinking about us. And it becomes a mental chase. It's it's a big reason why a lot of savvy, smart, educated, successful professionals refuse to prospect, because it makes them feel inferior. Suddenly, because I have to prospect, I'm down here, and the people that I'd love to do business with, they're up here. And it's like, yeah, I'm not going to respond to you, or by the way, if I'm going to respond to you, you better give me this information. And it doesn't sit well with the business developer, because after all, we spent years becoming the professionals we are. So how dare they? Okay. So, webinars, thought leadership, and for that matter, a huge one right now is behaviors around client relationships, or what I might suggest are resuscitation opportunities. Resuscitation opportunities, meaning like clients you used to work with. Clients you've met with in the past 12 months that didn't change to you. Sorry, not clients, prospective clients who you met with in the past 12 months that didn't change over to you, but you had a good conversation. You're going through change. Remember, they are too. They are too. And maybe, just maybe, some of the changes they're going through are painful enough that they decide to meet with you again. Okay, so check that out, because those are nice ways of getting extra conversations, the human-to-human conversations, that KPI I was telling you about, because they'll usually answer the phone when you call them, because after all, you didn't like run a poor meeting when you met with them the last time, the time they didn't buy from you. You ran a pretty good one. You built some rapport, right? So leverage that. Okay. So a couple things around just technology, social selling tools. I mean, things like LinkedIn. Okay. What I suggest is when you get in there, you must be laser focused. You must know exactly what you're looking for. You must be willing to be rejected. Okay. Because there is rejection even through the virtual means. And you must also call them to action. Eventually, you do have to get on the phone with these people and have a conversation. Now, be gentle about it, right? You should have a cadence and some talk, not talk tracks, but call it like chat cadences, for example, within LinkedIn to help you out. But other things you should even be doing is having a look at your LinkedIn profile, okay, and what's on there. When people look at your summary, about you, because that's usually where prospects go check you out when you call them or get in a first conversation with them. What does your summary say? Does it say something like, I'm a ambitious entrepreneurial individual, and I love long walks on the beach, that sort of thing? Or does it say, hey, here's the firm we're with, and here's the problems we solve? Because that's what they're really looking for when they check you out on LinkedIn. Think of it like bait, if any of you have ever fished. You want them to nibble on the bait and interact with you. Okay, so that would be maybe some social selling things that we could be doing. By the way, rule of thumb, when you socially sell or you post things, for example, on LinkedIn or Twitter, the good rule of thumb would be 3 third-party pieces of content, like not from your firm, and 1 from your firm. That would be reasonable. Okay. So we talked a little bit about email and cold email. Most of my savvy clients, what they would do is they would have like what I might suggest like a cadence. Things would be templated. Not only within the email, but also progression, right? Because not everyone's going to answer you after your first email or your first call, and they have a planned out cadence. There's lots of technologies that can help you with that. They're not Sandler technologies, by the way, things like SalesLoft. Okay, maybe you've heard of that. Check those things out. And by the way, don't be turned off by like things like Salesforce.com, a CRM. Don't be turned off by SalesLoft if you prefer not to be in sales. These are really smart technologies that can help you with your business development and make it easier. I should mention, most clients who come to us, they don't want to make biz dev and sales harder. They actually want to make it easier. Okay, so they can go and deliver and collect fees, right? Because that's how we make money. Okay, so let's talk a bit about technique. Okay, and when I think of technique, prospecting and selling, if we think of the two modes, certainly there's technique around account management, retention, and growth of accounts. But for today, we'll keep it more so to the prospecting and selling piece of the process. Okay, so when I think of technique, the first thing that comes to mind, this is our system. If you can't read it, what the top triangle says is personal presence. Okay, and personal presence has to do with you, your conviction, your comfort level with, for example, this technology, how you take care of your body language. So let me just say this. Some of you are on the call today on this webinar. Now, you're not interacting with me. I can't see you, but you can see me. You can probably tell I'm standing. You can probably tell like I'm fairly free. Like I've got a decent microphone. It's not the perfect microphone. I think I need to make an upgrade there, but nonetheless, I'm able to move. Remember, a lot of selling comes from your presence, and your presence primarily comes from your body. If you handle your body language, free it up a little bit, your tone typically will follow the body language you portray, and the words will usually land on them a little easier. Okay? The way they want them to. Think of sincerity. There's books written on selling is human. Can't remember who authored that one. You probably can. But a lot of that human piece comes from how you land on people. And how you land on people, I'll just say it one more time, comes from your body language. Question. When you're on these calls, Zoom, Teams, whatever it is, are you sitting? Do you find a way to share your screen, or even if you noticed earlier, I had a virtual whiteboard, share your notes? That creates presence, creates comfort. And these days, because tech is used so often in sales and biz dev, it shows them you know what you're doing without actually having to tell them you know what you're doing. Okay. The next piece around sales through technology or not, but I think because of technology, this piece is way more important, is your strategy for business development. Do you have a process to actually take people, do you have a process to take people from A to Z? A being first conversation, Z being maybe they're not going to work with you, but they're decisive about it. They don't kind of ghost you or tell you they're going to noodle on it or think it over and get back to you later, only never to get back to you, right? Okay, or maybe they give you a yes. Okay, so do you have a process for it? So, not right now, but think of the people who develop business in your firm. Here's a challenge. It's an easy challenge. It won't take you more than 10 minutes. On your next Zoom meeting or, all hands meeting through technology, maybe some of you are back in the office, okay? You can tell I am. Sit people around the table or the virtual round table and ask them to write down the steps of your business development or sales process. No cheating off each other. Have them write down the steps and see what they come up with. What I might suggest is, a good test to figure out if you really have a selling strategy, a process that you follow, that you hold others accountable to, right? Because we want to grow. A good test is if everybody comes up with the same version of the process. If they don't, good chance you actually don't have one. And a good chance you can't follow one or hold others accountable to one if growth is serious in your world. Okay, some people are okay with a lifestyle business. That's fine. Others want to grow. Okay, so do you have a process, or do you just wing it? Okay, another way you can figure out if you don't have a process is if you've ever seen this buyer's process. So the people who are interested in your firm or you, or maybe working with you, if you've seen this process before, there's a good chance You don't have a process because you were on what's called the buyer's process. Pardon me. Okay, buyer's process is pretty simple. They're keen, they show some interest, they respond to your initial emails, maybe even call you or inquire through your website. When you get them on a conversation, a call or a Zoom, they act motivated, they ask all the right questions. You give them your information, your pricing, your know-how, who you've dealt with in their industry, what size organizations usually work, how much experience you have, etc. Sometimes that's in a very thick document. Other times it's just you telling them. You try to close them. They say, I love you, but I want to sleep on it. For anybody who's a Meatloaf fan, you know those, you know that lyric, right, from that song? I love you, but let me sleep on it. So it's kind of the Meatloaf song coming to life, only it's happening to us in sales. And then we follow up with them next week, and they're harder to get a hold of. Suddenly, they don't return your calls as quickly as they used to, right? They don't return the emails. Maybe these days you're even trying to text them, but they're harder to get a hold of. In fact, to a degree, maybe they've disappeared on you a little bit. Okay, so if you've ever seen that process or ever felt that process, it can be frustrating. It typically means that the buyer has control of your sale. Meanwhile, you're the accounting doctor. You should be the one in control. And I use doctor not by accident. You've probably never walked into a doctor's office and told, like, self-prescribed. Maybe you have, but more than likely you haven't. The problem is sometimes, you know, our clients try to do that to us. They tell us what we need, they need our information, and then they leave. Okay. Meanwhile, we didn't do an appropriate diagnosis of their situation. Okay, so let me suggest this. If you do anything within a sales or business development process, my recommendation is do not give a recommendation too early in the process. Because when you do, they don't think they need you anymore. And that's usually where they're tougher to get a hold of, where you give away your know-how. Okay, and by the way, your know-how is valuable. So, you know, I'm going to give you a couple of ways to stay in touch with me. I mean, we've got some process documents. We're almost at time here. But like if you learned anything or you have any questions, here's what you're going to do. You're just going to shoot me a note. Oh, and by the way, if you made one decision today or you learned one thing that you can take action on, that could be one reason to stay in touch. There's plenty more here. And we deal with lots of successful companies. Okay. So if you got something out of it, you can stay in touch. Okay, you can either link in with me, Christopher Kelly, MBA, very easy to find, or you can shoot me an email. Okay, ask me for the tool I just showed you, ask me a question, yeah, we could maybe even have a short phone call if you were open to getting voice to voice. Okay, so we'll leave you to it. Have a good remainder of the show. Okay, make sure you hit one of the next sessions. I saw the topics, they look good. And I appreciate you spending time with me today.